Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me in another of my little monologues, a little chit chat with you today. Before I begin, I just wanted to say the other day when I mentioned about these very lovely dowsing rods that were given to us by Darren and Joe, a big thank you to that. Haven't yet really had a chance to go on the land and I was going to say play with them, but experiment with them I think is probably a better thing. What I meant to say is that give him, because he'd been so kind, is to tell you if you were interested in them, where you could get them from. His little business is called Sacred Copper Creations, and it says here, handcrafted copper products made with sacred geometry in mind, infused with intention of love and light. And you can contact him via his website, which is sacredcoppercreations.co.uk. So thank you again for that. And we will be having a go dowsing around to see if we can find water. Now, I'm just having a slurp of some fruit tea this morning on this cold and wet and blustery morning. Julia and I will be heading down to the post office to send out more of the old Biggleswick books that people have ordered, and thank you very much for that. That's very kind of you. Really appreciate people getting into that. And there's still time before Christmas if you think this book would be good for perhaps a loved one who may be slowly becoming aware that things are not what they seem, and they don't necessarily want to be given one of the sort of factual type books that outlays it all, but put into a story where it sort of drip feeds the information, then do get in touch, richard@vobes.com. Thank you very much. I'm going to have a little smoke of my pipe as I chat to you. Now, I want to talk about digital IDs and the name. Now, I know I've talked about this many times, and one of the reasons is I looked at the subscribers, not all of them, just a few of them. They were nice looking. I looked at the subscriber numbers and we'd crossed over 300,000 people, which meant that people are continually coming to the channel. Now, I know that some people will subscribe and perhaps forget and, not take any interest and they don't unsubscribe. But it means that more and more people have come and they may not necessarily look at old videos. And there's some things that I think is very important just to reiterate, I suppose. And people do send me emails and they say, Richard, I've got this issue and what have you, what should I do? And it's not, I can't give legal advice. And sometimes if I'm able to, if they mention a particular interviewee that I've had in the past, if I'm still in contact with them, I'll forward it on to them. But not all of those people want to be contacted now because it was like 2 years ago and they've moved on quite understandably. But the name is a very important thing, especially at the moment with these digital IDs. And we know that most people don't want them. Why would we want to be tagged with something which we perhaps are unsure is really relevant to us? But it seems to me that, of course, the powers that shouldn't be want us to have these things because it'd be easier for them to control us, to monitor us, to see what we're doing. I mean, with digital IDs, of course, comes CBDCs, the central bank digital currency, which again is another way to control who you are and what you're buying, and should you be buying that, and Big Brother telling us what we should have. Now, we've been under the illusion for a long, long time that this is a free society. And of course, it could be a free society if we choose not to be in the society, as it were, that we believe that we are in. But that's for another story. But one way of deciding to free ourselves from the shackles of this Big Brother and their digital ID and their central bank digital currency is to be aware of who and what we actually are. Because my question to you is, do you know who you are? Do you really know who you are? And I'm going to say to you that I don't think that anyone, not even you, can prove who you are. You might have a sense of what you are, and what you are may not be what other people think you are. We use language a lot, don't we? And you say, oh, I went to this particular place, it was deserted, there was not a soul in sight. Now, to me, that kind of gives you a bit of a clue of what we're talking about here. There's not a soul in sight. It's not, there wasn't a human being, there wasn't a physical body in sight, but there wasn't a soul. And, if somebody gets knocked over, say it's a little old man crossing at the lights, gets knocked over by an ambulance, let's say, for irony's sake, and you're talking about it in the pub afterwards and say, oh, I saw this old chap, he got knocked over, and then someone's about to go, oh, poor old soul. And again, this soul word keeps coming up. Now, that could be a clue as to who and what we are. To me, I think that I am aware that I'm just some form of consciousness, this sort of thing that peers out of this body, that has thoughts, that seems to have a mind. None of those things are me, but they seem to be attached to me, but they're not me. So maybe this is the soul that is peering out. You might have other names for it. But what it does mean is, if I look down at the accoutrements that I carry around with me, yes, my hands, my arms, my legs, my body, my emotions, I'm obviously not emotions, my mind, those sort of things. But in amongst that gathering of stuff which I would call my own is a label. And on that label is written a word, a name. Now, the question is, that name, and this is where it comes to the digital ID, is obviously not part of us. It's just a label that we adhere to. Now, if we look at the certified entry of the certified copy of an entry that a lot of people will call a birth certificate, we know now, do we not? I've talked about this enough times, that at the bottom it says, this warning, this cannot be used as evidence of identity. Which is interesting, because it means then, if that can't be used as evidence of identity, everything that has been used where we've had to produce this so-called birth certificate cannot be used as evidence of identity, like a passport or a bank statement or a utility bill. All of those things cannot be used as evidence of an identity. And how can it? Because if something is identical, then is it the same? An identity, you might say, well, here's a picture. Does that prove it's me? Well, it might have a likeness, but it isn't the same. It might be, it's not actually identical, because a photograph of somebody is on a flat sheet of paper. It's printed with ink. It has pixels, or it has, if it's been printed by lithographics, it's made up of a series of dots. It's not identical. And in fact, I would say we are unique, that we are a one-off. So the only way you could actually identify yourself is by presenting yourself and saying, here am I, this is the only way I can identify myself. And the decision of what you wish to be answer to or called is up to you, isn't it? Up to the individual soul that is there and says, yeah, I will answer to the name whatever. In my case, I might answer to the name Richard, or Vobesy, or Baldy, or Oyu, or, watch out, there's something about to knock you over. Oh, yes, thanks. Whatever it is, we decide what we want to be known as, and that might change. The fact that a government or a state have decided to call you something because perhaps your mum and dad came up with a bright idea for a name that may or may not be your preference, and then it's tagged into a surname that they then went and reported to the government, has really nothing to do with the individual, with you, your soul. How can it? The government, who registered all this stuff, did not make you. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know what made me, but it wasn't the government, it wasn't the state, it wasn't any of those who wished to stick a label on me and say, right, from now on, that's what you're going to be known as. And so therefore, I would say that if you're unable to identify yourself to your own satisfaction, How is it that the government can identify you to anyone else's satisfaction and to your own satisfaction, that the identity they want to pin on you digitally is real or true? I don't think they can. I don't think the government, the state, the crown can identify you. And so therefore, if you choose not to be identified, or you say ask them to prove it. Prove. And now I think this also goes with any of the documents we get. You get a utility bill for something and they say, well, we're after you, or a bailiff comes knocking at the door, or some other sort of nasty people come along and say, well, we need this money from you. You say, well, you prove that to me. How can you, unless you, the soul, the one that is looking out, says, yep, I'm going to agree in this instance to be that name, to be a name on a paper world, a flat earth world of paper. If you agree to that, then so be it. But if you don't, how can they prove? Because they've got no evidence. They can't use the birth certificate or the certified copy of an entry because it says on it itself, this is a warning, this cannot be used as evidence of identity. So how can they? They can't show you pictures of yourself and say, oh, here's a picture of you in Tesco's or Sainsbury's, and other supermarkets are available, and here's a snippet of conversation that says, oh yes, my name's Fred Bloggs of 23 Acacia Avenue, in case you're passing. They can't use that because they say, well, there's the evidence, what is it? And they said, well, that's just a bit of paper, that's not me, is it? That's not me saying that, that's a recording, that's something in the past, that's not a current status. And I can tell you, you are the only one who can actually say who and what you think that you might be. Very often I get these sort of documents that come in and purport to a name that I am not. And I just return them and say, look, I don't know who this is. Who is this? If you can prove who it is, if you can prove it's me, that's fine. But I'll send it back. Person not recognised. Send it back to the original person. Return to sender. Undelivered. That's how I deal with it. Of course, you've got to make up your own mind. Perhaps you do believe that the name that you've been told and brainwashed at school, and you put your hand up every time the register is called, perhaps you believe that is who you are, and that is what you are. A legal entity in a legal system. But if, like me, you think, hang on a minute, it doesn't ring true. How can you have a birth certificate that tells you that it's got nothing to do with you, and yet I've got to behave as if it is? How is that possible? Then that's the world you need to live in. But I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that entity has anything to do with me. Thank you for watching. I hope some of that made sense. I've enjoyed smoking my pipe, or what little of it I did. And I will catch up with you on another video relatively soon. Until then, toodle pip.